It started like any other day, but little did I know that this would turn into a battle I never expected. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, had crossed a line, one that went far beyond neighborhood rules and petty disagreements. They built 58 homes right on my land. Not a single word was said to me beforehand. No permission, no discussion, nothing. Just construction crews showing up and laying foundations on property that legally belongs to me. I remember standing there, watching heavy machinery roll over the fields that had belonged to my family for generations. This was farmland, open and untouched, a place where I'd spent my childhood running through tall grass and fishing in the creek nearby. And now, concrete and steel were replacing everything I held dear. I was shocked, angry, and completely blindsided. The HOA claimed they had some sort of agreement or right, but their paperwork was a mess, confusing, incomplete, and, frankly, looked forged in parts. They were trying to steamroll me with their fancy lawyers and official-sounding letters. But this was my land, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I tried talking to them at first, hoping to resolve things peacefully. I reached out to the HOA board, asked for meetings, demanded to see legal documents supporting their actions. They gave vague answers and changed the subject quickly. It was clear they didn't want to play fair. Instead, they acted like they owned the place already. As the homes went up, my frustration grew. It wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about respect, justice, and protecting what's rightfully mine. The HOA was setting a dangerous precedent, treating private property rights like a joke. If I didn't stand up, who would? Then I made a decision that shocked everyone. I decided to flood the homes, not out of spite alone, but as a way to make them understand the consequences of their actions. I knew the land's natural drainage systems, the creeks and low-lying areas. I knew exactly where the water would go and how to use it strategically. I wasn't going to destroy their property recklessly. I planned it carefully. Before taking action, I documented everything. I took photos and videos of the construction on my land. I recorded conversations with the HOA board members, noting their evasive replies. I consulted local laws and water management regulations. I wasn't reckless. I wanted to be smart and prepare for whatever fight came next. The day I released the water was tense. I opened a gate that controlled a natural water flow from the creek. Slowly but surely, water began to seep into the neighborhood. It started small, almost unnoticeable, but by the time evening came, parts of new development were flooding. The streets filled with water, yards turned into ponds, and basements began to flood. Neighbors were shocked. Some were furious at me, calling me names and threatening lawsuits. Others looked at me with sympathy, knowing the HOA had pushed too far. The HOA board scrambled, trying to figure out how to stop the flooding and protect their precious homes. But they had ignored my rights, and now they were paying the price. Despite the chaos, I never lost sight of why I did it. This wasn't just about me. It was about standing up against abuse of power. I wanted to send a message that you can't bulldoze someone's land and expect no consequences. I wanted to protect my family's legacy and show that sometimes you have to fight fire with water. As the floodwaters settled, the battle shifted from the land to the courts. The HOA sued me, claiming I was responsible for property damage and endangering residents. But I had proof, clear evidence that the homes were illegally built on my property without my consent. The legal fight was just beginning, but I felt ready. This story isn't just about land or flooding. It's about what happens when people in power forget who they're supposed to serve. It's about standing up for what's right when the odds are against you. And it's about the lengths someone will go to protect what's theirs, no matter the cost. After the flooding began, the reaction from the HOA was immediate and furious. They sent letters accusing me of reckless behavior, vandalism, and threatening the safety of their residents. Their lawyers were quick to file lawsuits, claiming millions in damages. But I knew the truth ran deeper than just water and property. It was about control and respect. The HOA thought they could steamroll over me because they had power and money. But I wasn't just going to back down quietly. I started digging into the HOA's own records, trying to find any legitimate claim they might have over my land. What I found was worse than I imagined. Documents that were incomplete, approvals that were never properly signed, and permits that didn't match the actual construction. It was clear they had jumped the gun, building without proper authorization, and ignoring property boundaries. Their whole operation was built on shaky ground, legally speaking. Meanwhile, the flooding was creating chaos. Some residents were terrified, especially those with young children and elderly family members. Others were angry, convinced that I had crossed a line. I understood their frustration, but I also wanted them to see the bigger picture. This wasn't a personal attack. It was a stand against illegal actions that affected all of us. I tried reaching out to the neighbors, explaining my side, but many wouldn't listen, blinded by fear or loyalty to the HOA. The media caught wind of the story, and suddenly, it wasn't just a local dispute anymore. Reporters showed up asking questions, digging into the legal battle between me and the HOA. I wasn't looking for attention, but I realized this could work to my advantage. Public pressure might force the HOA to come clean and rethink their aggressive tactics. It also gave me a platform to share my family's story, how this land had been in our name for generations, and how this fight was about preserving our heritage. The floodwaters began to recede, but the damage was done. The new home suffered costly repairs, and the HOA's reputation took a serious hit. Their board members were in crisis mode, trying to calm residents and find ways to prevent further damage. But the real damage was to their credibility. If they couldn't respect property rights or follow legal procedures, how could anyone trust them to manage the community? I also started working with local authorities and environmental experts. We reviewed the flooding impact and ensured it was contained to prevent harm beyond the development area. I wanted to show that while I was fighting back, I wasn't reckless. This wasn't about destruction for the sake of destruction. It was a calculated move to protect my land and send a message that illegal construction would not be tolerated. As the legal battles heated up, I prepared myself for a long fight. The HOA had deep pockets and skilled attorneys, but I had something just as powerful: evidence, the truth, and the support of some neighbors who were tired of the HOA's heavy-handed tactics. Every document I found, every witness who spoke up, made our case stronger. I wasn't just defending my land. I was standing up for justice and fairness. At the same time, I began to realize how complex these HOA disputes could be. They weren't just about property lines. They were about community, trust, and the balance of power. HOAs often operate in shadows, making decisions that impact people's lives without proper oversight. My battle exposed that darkness, shining a light on the need for accountability and transparency in these organizations. Throughout it all, my family stood by me. They understood the risks and the toll this fight could take. But they also knew how much this land meant to us. It wasn't just a piece of earth. It was home, history, and a symbol of everything we had worked for. Their support gave me strength on the hardest days, reminded me why I couldn't give up. I also started connecting with other landowners and residents who had faced similar struggles. Their stories echoed mine. People fighting powerful HOAs or developers who ignored their rights. Together, we formed a network to share advice, legal resources, and encouragement. It was empowering to know I wasn't alone and that our collective voices could bring about change. The situation was far from over, but I was determined. I knew the road ahead would be tough, with long court battles and more challenges from the HOA. But I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting to protect the principle that no one should be able to take what isn't theirs without consequence. The land, my family's legacy, and the truth were worth every battle. The court battles began in earnest, and I quickly realized how complicated and exhausting legal fights with an HOA could be. They had experienced lawyers on their side, while I was representing myself most of the time, learning as I went. Every hearing felt like a test, not just the facts, but my resolve and patience. The HOA tried every tactic to wear me down, from filing endless motions to questioning every detail of my evidence. But I stayed focused. This land was too important to let slip away. During the proceedings, new details about the HOA's actions came to light. It turned out they had deliberately ignored multiple warnings about the property boundaries. Several neighbors had even reported their concerns early on, but the HOA pushed forward anyway, prioritizing profit over legality. This reckless behavior only strengthened my case, proving they had acted in bad faith. The judge took notice, and it became clear this wasn't just a simple property dispute. Outside the courtroom, tensions in the neighborhood remained high. Some residents still sided with the HOA, convinced that the new homes were a benefit, and that I was the troublemaker. But more and more people started questioning the HOA's authority. They saw the flooded streets, the broken promises, and the mounting legal fees. Conversations in the grocery store, at school pickups, and community events shifted from casual gossip to serious discussions about fairness and rights. The media continued to cover the story, keeping the spotlight on the unfolding drama. Interviews with experts in property law and HOA governance helped explain the broader issues at play. It wasn't just my fight. It was a warning about what can happen when power is concentrated in the hands of a few without proper oversight. Many viewers reached out, sharing their own stories of HOA disputes and expressing support. It was overwhelming, but also encouraging to know this resonated beyond our little neighborhood. Meanwhile, the physical effects of the flooding lingered. Repairs were slow, and the HOA struggled to convince insurance companies to cover all damages. Some homes were left vacant for months, a constant reminder of the chaos their illegal construction had caused. The community's trust in their HOA board eroded further, leading to calls for new elections and reform. It became clear that the incident had sparked a movement for change. I spent a lot of time meeting with experts and advisors, preparing for the next phases of the case. Property surveys, environmental impact studies, and historical land records all became crucial pieces of evidence. It felt like putting together a giant puzzle. Each document had to fit perfectly to prove the truth beyond a shadow of a doubt. The stakes were high, but so was my determination. As the case dragged on, I also faced personal challenges. The stress affected my family, our daily routines, and even my health. There were moments when the weight of it all felt unbearable. But I reminded myself that this was about more than just me. It was about standing up to injustice and protecting what belonged to us all. Every phone call, every court date, every sleepless night was worth it. The HOA tried to negotiate behind the scenes, offering settlements that looked appealing, but came with strings attached. Promises to drop claims only if I gave up my rights entirely. I refused. Accepting those terms would mean letting them get away with what they had done. I wasn't just fighting for compensation. I was fighting for recognition and respect. Around this time, I discovered a group of attorneys specializing in land disputes and HOA law. Their expertise gave me hope and new strategies. With their help, we started uncovering even more questionable practices by the HOA, hidden fees, mismanagement, and conflict of interest that the board had tried to keep quiet. The legal landscape shifted dramatically, and the pressure on the HOA mounted. Community meetings became battlegrounds for change. Residents voiced frustrations and demanded accountability. Some board members resigned under pressure, while others tried to defend their decisions. It was a messy emotional process, but necessary. Transparency began to take root, and people started to believe that better leadership was possible. Through all of this, I kept my focus on the future. This land wasn't just property. It was a legacy to pass on to the next generation. I wanted to protect it from exploitation and ensure that no one else would face what I did. Every setback was a lesson. Every small victory a step closer to justice. The fight was far from over, but with each passing day, the truth came closer to the surface. The HOA's mistakes were exposed, the community's voice grew louder, and my determination never wavered. This was more than a legal battle. It was a fight for dignity, fairness, and the right to stand up when others try to take what's yours. As the legal battle wore on, it became clear that this fight wasn't just about land or money anymore. It was about power, respect, and setting a precedent. The HOA's arrogance had opened a Pandora's box they couldn't close. Their decision to build without permission not only violated my property rights, but also undermined the trust of the entire community. More neighbors began to question their leadership, and whispers of rebellion grew louder at every meeting. I kept pushing forward, gathering more evidence, and connecting with experts who could testify on my behalf. Environmental engineers explained how the flooding was a direct result of the illegal construction altering natural water flow. Property lawyers pointed out the numerous breaches of contract and zoning laws committed by the HOA. Each expert added weight to my case, slowly turned the tide in my favor. At the same time, the emotional toll became harder to ignore. Friends and family offered support, but I could see the strain on their faces. They worried about how much longer I could endure the stress, the constant phone calls, the mounting bills. But I had made a promise to myself, and to them, that I wouldn't back down. This land was our heritage, and it deserved every ounce of my fight. The community response was shifting too. Some neighbors who had once supported the HOA started attending meetings with questions and demands. They wanted answers about why the homes were built without proper permits, why they were now dealing with flooded streets, and what the board was doing to fix the mess. The HOA tried to brush off these concerns, but it was clear their grip was loosening. Behind the scenes, the HOA scrambled to save face. They held emergency meetings, hired PR firms, and attempted damage control. But public opinion was turning against them fast. The story had gained traction online, with social media posts and local news coverage exposing their mistakes. It was becoming impossible for them to ignore the consequences of their actions. Meanwhile, I worked closely with my legal team to prepare for the most critical court hearing yet. We reviewed every detail, anticipating the HOA's arguments and planning counterpoints. The courtroom was tense when the day finally arrived. The HOA presented their case, trying to paint me as a troublemaker causing unnecessary damage. But when it was our turn, we laid out the facts clearly and convincingly. Evidence, expert testimonies, and undeniable documentation showed the HOA's negligence and unauthorized actions. The judge listened carefully. It was obvious they were impressed by the thoroughness of our case and concerned about the HOA's blatant disregard for property laws. I could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was a culmination of months of frustration, fear, and hope. Outside the courthouse, supporters gathered to show solidarity. Some neighbors held signs calling for justice. Others simply stood quietly, offering words of encouragement. It was humbling to see that this fight had brought people together in a way I never expected. In the days that followed, the HOA's attempts to negotiate settlements became more frequent and urgent. They offered compromises that seemed generous at first glance. But I quickly realized they wanted me to give up key rights and allow future developments without oversight. I refused. This wasn't about quick fixes. It was about long-term protection and accountability. As negotiations dragged on, the community continued to heal and rebuild. Flood repairs were underway, and new measures were being discussed to prevent similar situations in the future. Local officials even stepped in to review HOA policies and enforce stricter regulations on development projects. Change was happening, but it came at a cost. Personally, the fight taught me more than I ever imagined. I learned about the intricacies of property law, the importance of community vigilance, and the resilience needed to stand up against powerful organizations. It wasn't an easy path, but it was necessary. Every challenge reminded me why I couldn't walk away. Throughout it all, the land itself remained a symbol of everything at stake. The fields where my family once roamed were scarred, but still standing. The creek that flowed through the property was a constant reminder of nature's power and the responsibility we have to protect it. This fight wasn't just legal, it was deeply personal. I began to see my role not just as a landowner, but as an advocate for others facing similar battles. Sharing my story inspired others to speak up, to challenge unfair practices, and to demand transparency. Together, we formed a stronger community, one that refused to be silenced or pushed aside. The road ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. This experience had changed me and my neighborhood forever. We had exposed the flaws in the system and taken a stand for justice. And though the battle was far from over, the momentum was on our side. With each passing day, the tension in the neighborhood thickened. The fallout from the flooding wasn't just about ruined homes or angry phone calls. It was about trust shattered and alliances broken. The HOA had underestimated how deeply people cared about their community and the land beneath their feet. What started as a silent encroachment had turned into an all-out war, with neighbors picking sides and old friendships tested. I spent countless hours talking to residents, some of whom had never even met me before this mess began. They shared their fears and frustrations about the flooding and the HOA's secretive decisions. Many expressed feeling powerless, trapped by the rules and fees imposed on them without transparency. It was heartbreaking to hear how the situation had affected their lives, and it only fueled my determination to keep fighting, not just for myself, but for everyone caught in this nightmare. The HOA board's attempts to regain control became increasingly desperate. They organized community meetings filled with rehearsed speeches and vague promises. But the crowd's questions were sharp and relentless. Why were these homes built without proper permits? Who approved the plans? What will you do to fix the flooding? The board members stumbled under scrutiny, unable to provide satisfactory answers. Their once solid image cracked, revealing the deep flaws in their leadership. Meanwhile, I focused on building a solid legal case. My team and I worked tirelessly to gather expert opinions, detailed surveys, and historical documents proving my family's ownership and the HOA's illegal actions. Every piece of evidence added weight to our claims, turning what seemed like an uphill battle into a strategic campaign for justice. I also reached out to local environmental groups who were alarmed by the flooding's impact on the natural habitat. Together, we assessed the damage to the creek and surrounding wetlands, highlighting how the illegal construction had disrupted natural water flow and increased flood risks. Their support brought a new dimension to the case, showing that the HOA's actions weren't just illegal, they were harmful to the environment and public safety. Public interest in the story grew. Social media posts, online forums, and local news outlets amplified the issue, drawing attention from people beyond our small community. Many shared similar experiences with aggressive HOAs or unauthorized developments. This connection created a ripple effect, inspiring others to question and challenge unfair practices in their own neighborhoods. Despite the mounting pressure, the HOA refused to admit wrongdoing. Instead, they doubled down, accusing me of sabotage and reckless behavior. They hired private investigators to dig into my background, trying to discredit me and shift blame. It was a dirty tactic, but one I expected from an organization desperate to protect its image. Through it all, I remained focused on the facts and the truth. I knew that staying calm and composed would be my strongest weapon against their smear campaign. I continued to engage with the community, answering questions honestly and openly. Building trust wasn't easy after so much conflict, but it was essential to moving forward. As the legal process dragged on, court hearings became battlegrounds of detailed arguments and cross-examinations. The HOA's lawyers tried to exploit every loophole and muddy the waters, but my legal team was prepared. We pointed out inconsistencies in their claims and emphasized the clear violations of property law. The judge's patience seemed to wear thin as evidence mounted against the HOA. Meanwhile, repairs and flood prevention efforts began to take shape. Local authorities stepped in to oversee emergency drainage projects and infrastructure improvements. Although these measures couldn't undo all the damage, they were a step toward restoring safety and stability for the neighborhood. The battle had also changed how I viewed community and responsibility. I realized that protecting land and rights wasn't just about ownership. It was about stewardship. We all have a duty to preserve the environment, respect boundaries, and hold those in power accountable. This fight had opened my eyes to the importance of vigilance and activism. Neighbors who had been divided by the conflict started finding common ground. Community groups formed to discuss future planning and better governance, demanding transparency and fairness from the HOA. It was a slow and sometimes painful process, but the seeds of change were being planted. Through late-night calls, strategy meetings, and moments of doubt, I reminded myself why this was worth it. The land held memories, history, and a future for my family and many others. Giving up was an option, not when so much was at stake. The more the HOA tried to dismiss my claims, the more determined I became to expose the truth. Their arrogance was staggering. They acted as if they owned not just the homes they built, but the land itself, ignoring laws and warnings alike. It was clear they underestimated the strength of the community's spirit and the power of standing up for what's right. Every attempt they made to silence me only made me louder and more resolute. I dug deeper into the HOA's records and found troubling patterns, hidden agendas, backdoor deals, and decisions made without proper consent. It was as if they had a playbook for bending rules to fit their desires, leaving homeowners and landowners like me in the dark. This wasn't just negligence, it was intentional. Sharing these findings with neighbors ignited a fire of awareness. People who once accepted the board's authority without question now demanded transparency and accountability. At the same time, I stayed in close contact with the environmental experts, helping document the damage caused by the flooding. Their report highlighted how the illegal development had disrupted natural watercourses, putting not just homes but local wildlife and ecosystems at risk. This added pressure on local authorities to take action and further discredited the HOA's attempts to downplay the severity of the situation. The legal battles became more complex, but I felt better prepared with each step. My lawyers and I were strategic, focusing on the most compelling evidence to present a clear narrative. The courtroom was a place where every detail mattered: maps, emails, official documents, all pieces of a puzzle revealing the HOA's disregard for the law. Watching the HOA scramble to respond was satisfying. They clearly hadn't anticipated a fight this well-organized and relentless. Meanwhile, the community began to heal in small ways. Those affected by the flooding shared stories and strategies, supporting one another through repairs and insurance claims. This solidarity made the fight feel less isolating. It became about protecting a shared future, not just personal losses. The floodwaters may have damaged homes, but they couldn't wash away the bonds forming among neighbors. Public pressure mounted as more local officials took notice. Meetings were held to discuss stricter regulations on development projects, oversight of HOA boards, and protections for property owners. The story became a catalyst for broader change, highlighting how unchecked power in HOAs could lead to serious problems. It wasn't just about my land anymore. It was about creating safeguards so no one else would suffer the same fate. The HOA, sensing their control slipping, made last-ditch efforts to negotiate privately. They offered settlements that seemed attractive on the surface, but came with conditions that would allow them to continue their questionable practices. I declined. Accepting those terms would have meant giving up the very protections I was fighting to secure. This was about principle and justice, not quick fixes. Through all the chaos, my family remained my anchor. Their support kept me grounded during moments of doubt and exhaustion. We shared late nights reviewing documents and strategizing next steps. We talked about the future we wanted to build, not just on this land, but within our community. Their belief in the cause gave me strength. As the case progressed, media interest continued to grow. Interviews, podcasts, and articles shed light on the issues at stake, reaching audiences beyond our neighborhood. The story resonated because it was about everyday people standing up to powerful organizations and winning. This wider attention added a layer of accountability that the HOA couldn't ignore. I also learned to appreciate the power of persistence. Legal battles are often long and grueling, full of setbacks and frustrations. But giving up was never an option. Each obstacle became a lesson, each victory, no matter how small, a reminder that change was possible. It wasn't just about winning the case. It was about proving that voices matter, that justice can prevail even against the odds. As the neighborhood looked toward recovery, conversations shifted from conflict to rebuilding. Plans were made to restore damaged areas and improve infrastructure to prevent future flooding. The community worked together on cleanup efforts and fundraising to support affected families. It was a slow, ongoing process, but hope was growing. At every step, I remained focused on the bigger picture. Protecting this land was about preserving a legacy and safeguarding the rights of all property owners. It was about ensuring that no one could bulldoze their way through laws and community values without consequences. This fight had become a symbol of resilience and determination. The days grew longer, and the weight of the battle pressed on me like never before. Every morning, I'd wake up thinking about the land, our land, and the homes now trapped in the floodwaters because of the HOA's reckless choices. It wasn't just about property lines or legal jargon anymore. It was about fairness, about respect, and about the principle that no one, no matter how powerful, should be allowed to trample on what's rightfully yours. As the conflict deepened, I started noticing how the flood wasn't just water. It was a symbol of what happens when greed and negligence mix. The homes built without permission were now vulnerable, their foundations soaked and unstable. Families who had trusted the HOA to protect their interests were left scrambling to save what they could. And yet, the HOA board continued to act like victims, painting themselves as misunderstood and unfairly targeted. In conversations with neighbors, I could feel a shift. Many of them had initially supported or at least accepted the HOA's decisions, but now they saw the true cost. The flooding disrupted daily life, damaged property values, and threatened safety. People shared stories of sleepless nights worrying about water seeping into basements or flooding yards. It became clear that this was no longer a dispute about abstract rights. It was a crisis affecting real lives. The HOA's response was predictable yet frustrating. They held more meetings, issuing statements filled with vague promises and blame shifting. But the community's patience was wearing thin. Questions grew sharper. Why wasn't the HOA held accountable? Who authorized the building permits? How could such a massive project proceed without any input from the landowner? These questions weren't just about me. They were about all of us. Meanwhile, I continued to gather evidence, knowing that facts were my strongest weapon. I obtained aerial photographs showing the original farmland and the newly constructed homes, proving beyond doubt that the HOA had encroached without permission. I compiled documents revealing missing permits and ignored zoning laws. Each piece of evidence was like a brick in the wall I was building against their injustice. Environmental studies added another layer of urgency. Experts documented how the altered landscape changed water runoff patterns, turning peaceful creeks into dangerous flood channels. The ecological damage was clear and severe, affecting plants, animals, and even the water quality in nearby areas. These findings attracted attention from local government agencies, pushing them to take a closer look at the HOA's practices. As the legal case progressed, court dates and hearings became a regular part of my life. The courtroom was a battleground where both sides presented their stories, but it was clear the truth was on my side. The HOA's attempt to justify their actions with technicalities and vague promises fell flat under scrutiny. I could see the judge's growing concern as the layers of deception unraveled. Outside the courtroom, the community's energy shifted from frustration to action. Neighbors organized cleanup days to repair flood damage and support those hardest hit. Discussions about forming an independent oversight committee to prevent future abuses gained momentum. It felt like a turning point, a moment where we collectively decided not to be passive victims but active protectors of our neighborhood. The media spotlight helped amplify these efforts. Local news outlets ran stories highlighting the human impact of the flooding and the legal fight behind it. Social media posts spread awareness, connecting us with other communities facing similar battles. This support network was invaluable, reminding me that this was bigger than just one family or one neighborhood. Despite the mounting pressure, the HOA refused to back down. Their lawyers sent threatening letters and tried to intimidate witnesses. It was a stark reminder that those in power often use fear and tactics to maintain control. But the community's resolve only hardened. People spoke out more boldly, refusing to be silenced. Through it all, I reflected on the lessons this battle taught me. Standing up for what's right isn't easy. It takes courage, patience, and the willingness to face uncertainty. But it also shows the power of unity and truth. When a community comes together, even the most entrenched forces can be challenged. I also realize the importance of knowing your rights and standing firm. Too often, property owners are unaware of the legal protections available to them. This fight inspired me to share my knowledge, helping others recognize when their rights are being violated and encouraging them to seek justice. At the same time, I didn't let anger consume me. I stayed focused on solutions, on building a path forward rather than dwelling on past wrongs. This perspective helped me navigate difficult conversations and negotiations, keeping the end goal, justice and restoration, in sight. Family remained my cornerstone throughout. Their unwavering support reminded me why this fight mattered so much. We dreamed together about a future where the land was safe, the community strong, and respect restored. That vision fueled every step I took. As I prepared for the next round in court, I felt a mixture of nerves and confidence. The battle was far from over, but the momentum was undeniable. We had turned a moment of crisis into a movement for change. And no matter what came next, I knew we had made a difference.